Hello, New Mexico, and welcome to another episode of Around the Roundhouse, a podcast featuring the policies, politics, and personalities of the land of enchantment. I'm your host, Daniel Chacón. Our guest this week is Larry Marker, who is running for the U.S. Senate as a Republican write-in candidate in the June primary. In order to advance to November, Mr. Marker will need at least 2,531 voters to physically write his name on the ballot. Not an impossible task, but one that requires a little bit of extra effort. Mr. Marker, who was born in Hobbs and raised in Roswell, is a self-described America First candidate or a supporter of President Donald Trump's policies. He's had a diverse career that includes working in oil and gas production, farming, ranching, manufacturing, and construction. A range of experience, he says, gives him a practical understanding of the state that cannot be learned from polling memos or political consulting. Mr. Marker, I know you're a busy guy, so thank you for joining us today.
Yes, sir. I appreciate you guys having me here today.
Mr. Marker, you've run for office before, so help us understand why you took the route of a write-in candidate as opposed to the more traditional route of collecting signatures.
Okay, the two races I had before, one, I ran as an independent for land commissioner. That was actually a write-in campaign from 4 years ago. Mm-hmm. And then I got back into the Republican Party. We, patched some past wounds or whatever, healed up. And then I got back into the Republican Party and I ran for state Senate in Senate District 27 down here. That's actually Roosevelt, Curry, and Chavez County. I got beat in that. That was a three-way race. I got beat in that. That was a regular primary. I got beat in. Pat Boone won that. And I'm glad Pat won it. I almost voted for Pat. I really like that guy. But I'm not really a very good politician and probably shouldn't have said that. But anyway, as far as the write-in candidacy here, it gets a little bit quirky. After that last campaign, wasn't long after that, we actually failed to gather enough signatures on a referendum. We attempted a ballot referendum on 6 bills that were passed in 2023. And we literally had thousands of people all over the state of New Mexico working on that deal. We had House Bill 7. That's the transitioning children without parental consent. It's a parental right deal. Multiple bills that have to do with that. There was a couple election laws. We thought we were going to be able to accomplish that. And this actually is part of answering this question. So don't think I'm beating around the bush. It's actually part of it. Anyway, after losing those 2 campaigns, putting a lot of people through a lot of work on that referendum effort, we ended up with, 37 or 38,000 signatures on each bill, actually averaged well over 30,000 on each one, but we needed 72,000. The effort failed. The effort failed miserably. And it was just, if I can say this on there, it was a butt whip and I was having a hard time getting over. I don't mind losing campaigns. You're going to try, you're going to fail, you get up and you go again. Well, that referendum project was a little more difficult because it was so important. It was so critical. And literally there were thousands of people who worked their tails off on that. And a lot of it was my fault. I believe I fumbled a little bit there towards the end. I was counting on some people supporting us that didn't. But regardless of all of that, I had basically decided I was going to take a few years off, try to heal up. I've had some battles with regulatory agencies, both state and federal, in the oil and gas industry over the last 8 or 10 years. And it's financially, they crippled me. And that's been tough. It's been a rough road. It's been really tough. And I like to tell people, I don't like to tell people, I wish I didn't have to tell them this, but you don't measure a man by how many times he gets knocked down. It's how many times he gets up after he gets knocked down. And then just as importantly, what does he do when he gets back up? Well, I was going to take a few years off, get my pellet business going. I've got a pellet mill down here making those wood barbecue pellets and stuff. Get that rolling. Still got some legal issues I'm working through. And I was going to take a break and just kind of enjoy my life, watch my grandkids grow up. I'm a granddad. That's really a lot of fun. If I had known being a granddad was this much fun, I would have been a granddad first. But anyway, me and my wife decided to kind of take it easy. Well, a couple of probably 6 or 8 months ago, there was some mention about me running for this Senate position. And I just told the people, guys, I'm tired. I've kind of taken a butt whipping. I need to iron out a few things. I've got a few cases against the governor and the state of New Mexico I need to finish up. And I'm going to take a little bit of a breather. I'll stay active, and I'm not going anywhere, but I'm not going to run for anything. Well, as things turned out, obviously I have a great number of friends across the state. I call them grassroots conservatives. A lot of them are left over from the old Tea Party Patriot days. You remember all that stuff. The Tea Party Patriots, and there's grassroots conservative organizations and groups and individuals all over the state of New Mexico. And a lot of them became more active during COVID, right after COVID and just before COVID. So that brought a lot of people to the forefront. Well, over time, the grassroots conservatives have gotten more involved. Well, the deadline came for a U.S. Senate, for somebody to file for U.S. Senate, and I'm not sure who or what the situation was. We had the Republican Party, the state party did have somebody that was intending to run or had told them they were going to run. I don't know all the details, and honestly, I don't care. It doesn't matter. Well, the deadline came and went, and the first I heard of it, there was on national TV, people were actually making fun of New Mexico and the Republican Party and conservatives in general for not even having a United States Senate candidate. Basically, we were the laughing stock of the country. Well, a few of my grassroots supporters that I've been in contact with, and I'm friends with a lot of them from, like I said, all over the state, we were talking, and a couple of them had mentioned me running for this position. I said, well, guys, I burned some bridges with the Republican Party. I tend to speak my mind. I burned some bridges with the Republican Party, and I burned some bridges with the caucus and what I would call the traditional Republicans or the traditional establishment. I don't call them rhinos anymore because we've actually formed a relationship, and I kind of see where they're coming from now. Well, so I said, I don't think there's any way that I can get the support that I need. And besides, all the people that have worked their butts off for me all these years, and every crazy project I had, come along, citizens petitions for grand juries, petitions for quo warranto. They've gone to my court hearings. The referendum project. I mean, there's some people in New Mexico have literally gone to the gates of hell for me. And I love those people. And I always try to tell them that I always try to make sure they know that I appreciate their efforts. And I told them, the referendum project, I believe I fumbled that a little bit. And well, they didn't agree with that. They said, we all got beat together. And I said, I don't want to drag those people into another losing project. And obviously, I needed to pray about it. And they asked me this, well, pray about it. I said, I'm going to need about 4 or 5 separate phone calls. It would be from the state party, various different grassroots people, and a couple of the traditional Republicans that I'd burned a bridge with. If those people would call me and tell me that they would support me, or at least not stand in our way when we try to accomplish this, I would consider it. But other than that, I'm not going to spend 30 seconds even thinking about running for this office because I'm out of money. I don't want to drag people into another losing proposition. These people have been beat up enough. And to be honest with you, I'm sick of getting my butt whipped. Well, within 2 hours, every one of those people called, and then a few more called, and some of my grassroots people called. And when people that have supported you, and regardless of what they had going, they dropped everything and supported, the efforts that I initiated or was a big part of. When people like that ask you to do something, you step up and do it.
Okay. All right.
So it made it an easy decision. The party was happy because I did have some experience with the write-in campaign. I wasn't afraid of it. I'm not afraid of it. I'm not afraid of the write-in campaign because I have a lot of confidence in people. In the last write-in campaign, the issue was more with the training of the poll workers and stuff. But that has been rectified. We actually taught a lot. The state of New Mexico learned a lot 4 years ago in that write-in campaign with what we had to do as far as the machines, how they accepted the ballots, a different tray. all of
Mr.
that.
Marker, if I may interrupt just slightly here, you mentioned the Republican Party of New Mexico being, the laughing stock at the national level, and it wasn't until you and two others stepped in as write-in candidates that the Republican Party of New Mexico didn't have a candidate for U.S. Senate, state treasurer, or state auditor. What does that say about the party? Is it a party that's disorganized or in disarray?
Well, the way I see it, and this has been a subject for the last several years, we're seeing the Republican Party, and this gets back to the grassroots conservatives and the difference that we're seeing. And let's just stick with the state party for right now, and the various different county parties. As you know, part of New Mexico is very, very, very red, very conservative, very Republican. Very few Democrats run for these offices. Well, in years past, the Republican Party pretty well had the run of things down here in southeastern New Mexico. People would be involved in the county party, and somebody that was moving up in the party, if they wanted to run for an office, they would tell the leadership in the area and maybe tell the caucus, say, hey, I would like to run for representative, let's say in District 59. Well, the party would kind of would accept that and say, well, yeah, you've paid your dues, whatever, however they work. The quote to me was, we have a system and you're messing it up. And that's when I started getting involved in politics. I was actually messing it up. Well, over time, a lot of the grassroots conservatives have gotten more involved in the political process. Well, the Republican Party statewide is in flux. It's a lot different looking party than it was. Your traditional old school Republicans, they're still there, but they're not completely controlling things. So that's why you're seeing a lot of grassroots conservatives or grassroots Republicans now running for these offices, and it's created some turmoil and some strife. And obviously, anytime you change things, it's going to create strife. Well, for the last 40 years in southeastern New Mexico, we very rarely had any kind of contested primaries, and obviously in the general, it was a Republican. So if you were the guy that was kind of chosen, the good old boy deal, I'm not saying it's good, bad, or whatever. I'm not dissing anybody. That's just the way things were done. The problem in southeastern New Mexico is all the voters down here, after the primary, they lost interest. So the statewide candidates would suffer in the general election. So the reason we didn't have a candidate, obviously the U.S. Senate candidate, I have a suspicion of who it was, and he was one of your old school traditional guys, and he opted out for whatever reason. Well, the Republican Party kind of paying homage to the old school guys. They said, well, we'll protect him. We'll tell people we've got a guy. Don't worry about running. Maybe next time, whatever. Well, when it comes down to it, he decided to opt out and left them hanging. So having the grassroots conservative involved, obviously we have a plan B. So when they contacted me, obviously at first I was hesitant, but when I jumped on board, and the state party has been fantastic.
Okay.
They've worked their tails off trying to help me out, and the other two write-in candidates as well. We also have some write-ins in some of the representative races in the districts around Albuquerque and I believe up in Rio Rancho. So the Republican Party is changing. The complexion of the party is changing completely. We're seeing a lot of grassroots conservatives get involved. Ramona Goolsby, the Republican candidate for Secretary of State, she was an independent up until January, and she saw that there was no SOS candidate, so she decided to go ahead. And we discussed it, and I said, Goolsby, if you decide to run, you need to run as a Republican because they are established. We have access to those people. So she actually changed her affiliation to Republican, and here she is, and she's straight out of the grassroots conservative movement. So what we're seeing is a change, and I believe that was the reason we got caught a little bit. I don't know if this is a term everybody understands, but a little bit with our pants down when this election came up. But we're getting it handled. We're actually going to make history with this U.S. Senate write-in campaign, and this is truly a grassroots write-in campaign.
I did do a little research and found that it is not unprecedented for a write-in candidate to win a U.S. Senate seat. But let me ask you, what is your pitch to voters? Why should they vote for you?
Well, the pitch to me is pretty simple. It's clear. I'm going to have my hard and fast rules. I've got my principles. I've got my values. I can't waver from those. Obviously, I'm a conservative, a God, family, country. That was an old Tom Landry quote. And I try to live my life by that. God, family, country. Any decision I make, or when you get me, you get that foundation, God, family, country. Do I err and make mistakes in life? There's no doubt. As far as why people should vote for me, you could look at what I've been through in life, the years in business, the experiences I've had, especially in the oil and gas industry, the experiences I've had with the regulatory agencies, the overreach, the out of control regulatory agencies, the burdensome regulations, that sort of thing. Being in the garage door business for years, those regulations got to be worse and worse and worse. It's tough to be a small businessman in the state of New Mexico because they're coming at you from all areas. As far as why you should vote for me, I'm going to be one that's going to stand up for the obviously for the business people, but I'm also going to stand up for the families. The parental rights is important to me. Transitioning children without parental consent, that's completely wrong. That should never happen. In the U.S. Senate, a lot of those social issues aren't going to be coming up. Those are more at state level, like abortion is now pretty much a state level issue. So in the U.S. Senate, I'm going to be focused on making government smaller and holding not only regulatory agencies and the people that work for the regulatory agencies, but holding politicians accountable. One of the few things I will tell you is a hard and fast rule, and the thing that I would pursue in Washington is term limits. It's insane that we don't have any term limits in Washington in Congress or in Senate. So what that is one thing I'm going to pursue over the next 6 years. But for sure, any decisions I make are going to be based on the values of the people that I represent, God, family, country, your family values, and making government smaller, because as you know, the bigger the government is, the fewer liberties you actually have. Property rights is important to me. I'm a pretty easy guy to figure out, and I'm going to do whatever it takes to get the job done. I'm not going to waffle back and forth on the issues, but whatever I need to do, whatever I need to do to get the job accomplished is what I'm going to do. And I'm going to be a voice for the people in New Mexico, not just southeastern New Mexico, but people all over New Mexico.
Mr. Marker, let's talk a little bit about the Democrat incumbent that you hope to unseat in November, U.S. Senator Ben Ray Lujan. Has he been good or bad for New Mexico?
Okay. I'll just start with this. I don't want to be negative about anybody, and I was taught not to talk bad about people unless they're in a room with me or we're having a conversation. From where I stand as a constituent of Ben Ray Lujan's, what I have seen him, he has leaned real heavy on what I would call the gimme programs or the welfare type programs. That's good to a point, but if we keep people downtrodden, we keep bailing them out, and they don't have any reason to improve the status of their life, they're probably not. I struggle with the government continually giving handouts and not giving people an opportunity, an economic opportunity. And it's my belief is if New Mexico were was better off economically, then all the people would be better off. One of the mottos I've developed, and it's not just in my campaign, but actually in New Mexico as a whole, is the rising tide lifts all boats. If New Mexico's economy would match some of the better economies in the country, New Mexico would be much better off, and everybody would have more opportunities. A lot of the brain power in New Mexico has been leaving simply because we don't have opportunities. We're one of the few states that actually is losing population. We're losing population because there's very few opportunities. The oil and gas industry, you would think that would be booming. And for the larger companies in New Mexico, it is booming and it's going big guns. The problem is the state of New Mexico, with the help of the Bureau of Land Management, which is a federal agency under the Biden administration, was doing everything they possibly could do to push the small independent operators out of business, which is how they got me out of business. They regulated me out of business. There was, literally hundreds of independent operators that are now out of business. And every one of those operators employed 2 or 3 different people had water trucks, those sort of things. In New Mexico here 4 or 5 years ago, we shut down a coal-fired power plant. That in turn shut down the coal mine. That was actually a generational place of employment for a lot of the people up in the Navajo Nation. So what did they replace that with? They replaced it with nothing. We've shut down the refinery in northern New Mexico. Obviously, there's no uranium mining in New Mexico. There's opportunities here that we're not taking advantage of. And instead of striving to take advantages of our natural resources and the ability of our people to work, because people in New Mexico can work and they can work hard. Instead of doing that, we've been focusing on gimme programs and welfare, where we need to get past that. This is not socialism. This is capitalism. The more opportunities people have, the more they're going to take advantage of it. And that's where I see the main difference in me and Mr. Lujan is I'm going to be focused on people working themselves out of poverty, when he seems to be focused on, it's okay, we've got enough money to keep you in poverty. And if we keep you in poverty, you'll keep voting for me. Well, if somebody is up and coming and they're capitalists and they're getting better and their life is getting better, they're able to provide for their families, they're able to start businesses, they're able to send their kids to college, they're able to pay their own way. And there's a certain pride that comes with that. That's what I'm about, is the pride of people accomplishing stuff on their own and seeing that look in their face when they actually realize there's hope. There's hope for me to better my life. There's hope for me to generate generational wealth. The sky is the limit in the state of New Mexico, and I'm not sure why we haven't realized that. That was a long answer, wasn't it?
That's okay. This is an opportunity for voters to get to know you, and if you want to provide a long answer, that's okay. It means less work for me. Let me ask you. You described yourself as an America First candidate. Exactly what does that mean?
Okay, an America First candidate, and I got in trouble for saying this in a speech. I said, I'm an America First candidate, and I'm also an American First candidate. When I say America First, I'm talking about on the world stage. We're going to do what's good for the United States of America. We're going to focus on the United States of America.
You're in line with the president's policies, correct?
I'm in line with most of the president's policies. Yes, sir. On the world stage, definitely on the world stage. The closed borders, the limits on immigration, the people that we want from other countries. If people want to come over here legally and be part of our society and assimilate, I think that's fantastic. I think that's the greatest part about the United States. But we've always been able to manage that better than we've managed it in the past few years. I like it when, for example, when we have the Olympics going and there's a picture of 50 American athletes. They're all different colors. They all look different, but most countries don't have that. Mm-hmm. I'm proud that the United States can be like that, but those are mostly immigrants. Their families came over, they assimilated, and they became part of the United States of America, and we're all brothers and sisters as Americans. That's why it's important to limit the number of people that can come into your country, have legal immigration, and move from there.
Let me ask you, Mr.
To me, that's part of the America First agenda. And then again, you could ask me about Taiwan. Let's say that China jumps on Taiwan. Well, before we go to defending any of our allies, and obviously if they're our allies, we need to consider that. Well, what is the best thing for the United States of America? What does that ally bring to the table? Do they reciprocate the good for the good? Do they bring as much good to the table as they take? When I say America First, that's what I'm talking about. When I say American First, it's Americans inside the United States first and foremost above everybody else. When I say American First, our veterans need to be considered before anybody else, anybody else from any other foreign country. We take care of our veterans, our disabled veterans. We take care of our own poor or our own disabled. Then we can extend a hand to people outside of the United States or lend a hand in that manner. But as far as America First and American First, yes, I support most of Donald Trump's policies. On a personal level, me and Mr. Trump may not get along, but his policies I see are better for the United States of America and its citizens.
Why would you say that you might not get along with him on a personal level?
Well, he's a New York real estate guy. He would be like, I'm a Dallas Cowboy fan. I've already mentioned that. I probably wouldn't get along with Jerry Jones either because he's a rich oil man. I've known a lot of rich oil men. I don't get along with most of them. Being an independent, obviously, I had a lot of experience with him. And Donald Trump would be the same way. I think he's done a great job for the country. Some of the things he does kind of bother me, but in my world, if a guy shows up to work and he's a good hand, whether you're on a Brandon crew, a roughneck crew, on drilling rig or whatever, if a good hand shows up and goes to work, if he's a bit of a smart aleck or he stinks or whatever, you really kind of leave the guy alone and just let him do his job. And that's my position with Donald Trump. Does he irritate me when he tweets and stuff like that? Yeah. Obviously, it irritates me, but he's a good hand, so I'm going to take the bad with the good. He's doing a good job, and my thought is let's leave him alone, let him do his job, and see what happens.
Okay. Mr. Marker, if you make it to November, you'll likely get the Republican vote, but how do you plan to sway independents and Democrats should, again, you make it to the general?
Okay, as you know, and there's been a lot of talk about this, the independent votes, there's like 78 or 80,000 additional DTS on the voter rolls in the state of New Mexico. We've got quite a few moderate Democrats, and I've talked to some of those, but statewide, I know a lot of independents. I know a lot of guys that were sick of the Republican Party, guys and girls. When I say guys, I mean everybody, okay? There's a lot of people that were sick of the Republican Party, the old guard, the old school, and that's where we're seeing the influx of grassroots conservatives in the Republican Party. A lot of those are coming back and getting engaged. When I went to get my nominating signatures, I needed 2,351 nominating signatures to even start this process. A lot of the people that were sharing the link to sign my nominating petition were actually independents. They couldn't sign my nominating petition, but they were more than happy to send it to the Republican friends. So I've got a lot of support among the independents around the state of New Mexico, and a lot of that is because of my activism efforts and that we're aligned on most everything. But once I ran as an independent and realized you're going to have an established party behind you to get anything done, and that's mainly because you can go to the county meetings, you can go to the forums and the debates as a member of that party, and you can really get your word out. So a lot of the independents are going to track towards me anyway from past experiences. But once people get to know me, they realize that there's not a lot of guesswork when you're dealing with me. I'm pretty much a simple guy. I'm going to say exactly what I feel, exactly how I see it. I'm going to be sometimes a little too honest. I try to be respectful. I've gotten a lot better about communicating, especially the last year or so, and especially the last couple of months. As far as swaying people to come over and vote for me, once they see my policies, they realize, or talk to me, and they realize this is a guy that's going to do whatever it takes to get the job done. We can focus on the future. We can actually realize that this guy brings hope. And one thing I've learned about people, a little bit of hope goes a long way. Right now, New Mexico seems to be struggling with hope in the future and hope in our state. I'm tired of seeing that. I would like to see more hope in people's eyes, and we're actually seeing that. I'm seeing a massive move towards not just a conservative platform, but the conservative way of thinking. Let's look to the future. Let's build a future together. Let's have some hope in this future, and let's fix New Mexico. Instead of running off to Texas or wherever we're going to go, and a lot of people have done that, instead of running off to Texas, let's just stay home and fight the battle here. And at some point, our kids and grandkids will be able to stay home. They'll grow up down the street where they need to be, and they won't be leaving New Mexico to find opportunities elsewhere.
Well, let's talk about the political battle. If you make it to November, would potentially face a very well-known, established candidate, established Democrat who is well-funded and, again, has high name ID. So how realistic is it that you would be able to unseat a Democratic incumbent U.S. Senator?
Okay, I did crunch the numbers, and that was a good question. When I first started looking at this, Ben Ray had about $4 million in it, what I would call in his war chest. I think he's got $7 million now. He's got quite a bit of money. He's got what political people call name recognition. I absolutely hate that phrase, by the way. he's got what people call name recognition. Well, as a candidate, I looked at that. I looked at the numbers. I looked at 2020 when he actually won this seat. He beat Mark Ronchetti by 56,000 votes. Well, in between 2020 and 2026, January of 2020 and January of 2026, there's 57,000 more registered Republicans on the voter rolls now than there was in 2020. There's 7,000 fewer Democrats on the voter rolls than there was in 2020. And obviously there's about 80,000 more DTS. Leaving those numbers aside because they're a bit skewed because of the way that people are registered DTS now. But when you look at that, that's a 64,000 vote net. And looking at what I would call the winds of change or the momentum across the state of New Mexico, a good example is I was in Dattle, New Mexico 2 weeks ago, 2 Saturdays ago. There was 92 people in a meeting and there was 9 candidates there. There was actually Bregman was there. There were 8 Republicans and a Democrat candidate at this meeting. There was 92 people in the audience in Dattle, New Mexico. 4 years ago, I was in Dattle, New Mexico. There was 3 candidates and 6 people. I was in Raton that a few days prior to that. We had 55 people and 13 candidates at that meeting. So there's a lot of interest in this election, and especially in this Republican primary. Obviously, I don't travel the Democrat circles, but I'm seeing people's attitude change. And, obviously in Lee County, Eddy County, and Chavez County, we've struggled the last several years with voter turnout. We'll have a primary and we'll average about 25% voter turnout. Well, that's completely ridiculous. Well, the difference that we see now is you have a lot of contested races for these county commission spots, auditors, all of this regional stuff, regional or district stuff. We're having a lot more contested races. So there's a lot more people interested in the political process. This election is not going to be over in June in southeastern New Mexico like it normally is. It's going to be fought all the way until we get to November. The Republicans are lagging.
Mr. Martin, let me ask you about November, because you did mention some of the ballot referendums that you championed, although you did not have success with those. But one of those, you have a record of opposing abortion rights, from filing a lawsuit to halt abortions in the state, to trying to overturn the legislature's repeal of a decades-old abortion law through, as we discussed, a petition drive. Won't that hurt you in a blue-leaning state like New Mexico, especially among female voters?
Okay, this is actually a 2-part question, and I'm really glad you asked that question. The first part is going to be that I file a lawsuit trying to end abortion in New Mexico. That's actually not true. What I did is I filed a lawsuit to try to end late-term abortion in the state of New Mexico. I was comparing late-term abortion to the criminal law that says if you're the cause of the death of a fetus or an unborn baby after 22 weeks in a traffic accident, you can actually be charged with a crime in the state of New Mexico. But if you're, let's say that you're an abortion or a person that performs abortions, an abortionist, you could go to jail for killing a 22-year-old fetus in a car wreck, but show up Monday morning and do one in your office, and there's no consequence to that. What I was trying to do was put, okay, late-term abortion is horrendous. 80% of the population, probably 90% of the population, is opposed to the late-term abortion. That's what the lawsuit was actually. That was what that lawsuit was actually about. The other issue I was fighting was the repeal of the 1969 law. If you'll remember, just the year prior to Roe v. Wade being overturned, the state legislature overturned the 1969 law. Now, what people don't realize is that 1969 law was actually a law that increased access to abortion to include the health of the mother, incest, and rape. That's what the 1969 law did. Now, the reason I was opposed to repealing that the way that they did, it was just like a five or 6 word, I think it was an 8-word sentence, honestly, that repealed the entire statute. That removed all protections, period. Now, it wasn't an issue until Roe v. Wade got overturned. And I knew if Roe v. Wade ever got overturned, that it would be a free-for-all. Well,
ask you, this history of opposing abortion rights, will that not hurt you come a general election?
It's liable to hurt me with specific voters. Again, the abortions are now a state issue. I am going to be in the United States Senate, but just full disclosure and full honesty, if somebody asks me if I'm pro-life, I'm going to have to say I'm pro-life. I can't waffle back and forth. I would rather consider a man that is going to stand his ground on what he believes than a guy that's going to waffle back and forth. I can't tell you that I would be okay with abortions up to a certain time or whatever. I do get in trouble with some of the pro-life people because I am one that believes we need to consider the health of the mother, rape and incest in abortion. I'm a big proponent of the morning after pill, but I'm a bigger proponent of young men taking, or men in general, taking responsibility for what we've been doing for years. And that's probably where my position on abortion came from. As men, we've completely dropped the ball. Very few people mention the fact that half of this problem or more is the men in this country. We've dropped the ball and we failed to take responsibility for our actions. That would be something we need to tackle before we tackle the abortion issue as a whole. Do I believe it's going to hurt me? I can't honestly say that. I don't know if it's going to hurt me, because in my world, I'm just going to have to stand up for what I believe, regardless of what it does for me politically.
Okay. Mr. Marker, any kind of closing words to voters? Where can folks go to your website to learn more about you?
Okay, you can go to larrymarker.com. We're still working on the website. It looks pretty good. It's got most of the basic knowledge. You know, it's going to be hard to sit here and tell you exactly how I'm going to get things accomplished in DC. It's going to be a rough go. Actually getting elected is going to be a rough go. But what I will tell you, when I go to Washington, DC, I'm going to work my tail off to do exactly what I said. The United States government needs to be a bit smaller. We need to get a handle on our regulatory agencies. We took a big step with the Chevron deference when that got booted out, the doctrine, which is the Chevron deference. When that got booted out, that's going to be a big advantage when we're dealing with bureaucracies and regulating people out of business. We've got issues with ranchers on federal land, the Forest Service, overreach all over the place. The Endangered Species Act, we need to get a handle on that. So as far as why somebody should vote for me, I'm basically you. You know, I'm your voice going to Washington, D.C. I'm going to carry your voice, and it's probably going to be pretty loud at times. We're going to get a little bit Western, and I understand that. I'm not going to go to D.C., and I'm not going to embarrass you. I'm going to conduct myself as professional as humanly possible, but I am going to stand my ground, and I'm going to stand my ground for the state of New Mexico. We don't need to be the laughing stock of the state of New Mexico. In years past, we had Pete Domenici, Tom Udall. We had people like that in Washington, D.C. representing us. We haven't had that type of guy in several years. We need to change that. United States Senate needs a conservative, somebody that's focused on helping the citizens of the state of New Mexico, not only getting through a tough time, but helping them get to a period in their life where they're actually improving their life, the economics of their life are getting better, and they have a future and they can see a future down the road. That's why you need to vote for me. I love the people of the state of New Mexico. I love the state of New Mexico, but we've got a long ways to go and we need to get to work.
All right. Well, Mr. Marker, thank you so much for this opportunity to get to know a little bit more about you and where you stand on various issues, and for readers and viewers to get to know you. So thank you so much for spending time with us today. And as always, thank you to our viewers and listeners for tuning into Around the Roundhouse. Join us every week as we talk to newsmakers in the political realm by subscribing through Spotify, YouTube, where else, Apple, or wherever you get your podcasts. For the latest developments, including our ongoing coverage of the primary election, follow our coverage online at SantaFeNewMexican.com, where you can also subscribe to our political newsletter, The Roundhouse Report. Until next time, I'm Daniel Chacón, and this has been Around the Roundhouse.